when a lot of suffering and it's unendurable. So we may, I hope none of us ever do, but we may want to know what our options are to start that. So the first option is pretty passive and straightforward. Refuse medical treatment. So it turns out that if we're on antibiotics or other medications, that it's pretty simple to say no. And if we were to get pneumonia or sepsis, that's not the worst way to go on. So that was news to me. I thought, oh no, I want to avoid pneumonia, but it's now it's called what's it called, the old man's friend, old person's friend. So, so that's, but it's not as easy as it sounds, because that last month, the medical establishment is geared toward testing and treating, and making changes in our medication are going to be more difficult than it might sound. So we have to be forceful in pursuing these options. And that's one reason to make sure that our medical proxy is on board with what we want. Because if we can't go toe to toe with our medical team, they can do it for us. An additional challenge is, I'm sorry, down. Okay, thank you very much. Good, because it was echoing in me too, so I appreciate that. Is this better? Okay, great, thanks. So another challenge is that many medications and treatments are both therapeutic and palliative. So the trade-offs might not be as clear-cut as we think, but we can talk to our medical team about that and say, okay, this is the plan, how do we move forward? Another option is voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. So this is another pretty passive approach if we want to hasten things. It's not what do I want to say? It's not to be done without preparation, planning, knowing what to expect, not to do it without some support system. So it kind of depends on the condition of the person, their size, their malady. Minimally, they would need to be have their lips kept moist. Some people become euphoric, some agitated, some people it takes a few days, some take a few weeks. And sometimes morphine is administered to keep the person comfortable. So some hospitals will support voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, some will not. So, and it's not as straightforward as one might think, to just call around and say, oh, this is what I'm planning, when we support it, because what we found is that sometimes the organization itself might say, oh, yes, but there may be a staff member whose personal and/or religious beliefs prevent them from supporting them. So, as I said last month, and as I always say, everything is much more complicated than we would want it to be. One thing we also suggest is for the person considering voluntarily stopping eating and drinking to make a video of themselves. Okay, this is me, this is today, this is what my plan is. So because as the brain starts shutting down, we might forget, wait, what am I doing? Why am I doing that? What's happening? Why can't I have that strawberry milkshake? So if we play back our own voice, our own image saying, remember, dear, this is what we're doing. And of course, one can stop at any point in the process if that strawberry milkshake is, that is just too appealing. But one advantage, I think, of VSED, voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, is that it gives one agency. We don't need permission from anyone. We could say, I'm stopping this tomorrow. No physicians need to be involved, no signatures, no nothing. So I think that's a big benefit. So here in California, we're pretty fortunate because I assume you all know that we have death with dignity legislation. And this was approved in 2015, so it's about 10 years old. It didn't go into effect until 2016. And as residents of California, those of us who are 18 years of age or older, mentally competent, and diagnosed, and this is the important part, diagnosed with a terminal illness and a 6-month prognosis. So that is the diagnosis that's often challenging to get, because if it's cognitive decline, if it's a neurodegenerative disease, if we're just old and falling apart, we won't qualify for California's medical aid in dying or physician-assisted dying. So that's one thing to bear in mind as we explore our options. And as I'm saying, maybe we won't ever have to explore many of these. And also, it often turns out that what seems like a good option at one point may shift over time as our condition changes. Maybe we plateau, maybe we expedite it. Often I talk to people and they say, oh, well, if and when the time comes, I'm just going to go to Switzerland. Well, that sounds romantic and kind of glamorous, but is it really going to be viable at the end? It's really expensive. I think it's about $10,000 or $15,000 plus the airfare, plus all navigating all the finances back and forth, the medical records. I think they want a psychiatric exam. So it's really a little more complicated, here I go again, than we would have it. And I was working with a fellow who had applied to Final Exit Network, which is the organization I volunteer with, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. And he had been approved, and I can't remember why, but he said, you know, just shred my paperwork. I think what I'm going to do is go to Switzerland. Okay, fine, this is all about you, whatever you want. And then he called me back a year or two later and said, get serious. I can't get myself from Switzerland. This is not going to happen. Can I reapply? And the answer was yes, and he did reapply. So that's what I mean about our options shifting over time. It may not be what might look good in one moment, might not be the same. How many of you have read Amy Bloom's wonderful memoir, In Love? So that is a really great roadmap of her accompanying her husband, Brian, who was experiencing cognitive decline, to Switzerland. But for those of you who read it know, it was really pretty arduous getting all of that stuff done and figuring out what his window of opportunity was, because that's a really important piece of the puzzle. Nobody wants to leave any earlier than necessary, but they need to do it while they can physically and cognitively make it happen. So I tell my colleagues, call it leaving some life on the table. I'm not really fond of that expression, but it's sort of descriptive. So, so the organization, so I guess can we all turn off our phones? I'll make sure I turn mine off. I'm distracted. And when I counsel people, there are two references that we recommend. One is the Peaceful Pill Handbook, which is put out by Exit International. It's called Peaceful Pill Handbook. And before you order it from your library or your bookstore, be cautioned that there is no such thing as a peaceful pill. So people get all excited, I'm gonna read that book, and then I'm gonna read the pill, and then I'll be upset. Well, no, unfortunately. The other resource we recommend is Final Exit 2020, which is the ebook update of Derek Humphrey's 1991 classic book on hastening one's death. And I'll just take a moment to give a shout out to Derek, who passed away a few weeks ago. He was really an incredible pioneer for the movement. While I'm waving this magazine around, let me tell you a little bit about Final Exit Network, which is the organization I volunteer with, and what makes me think I'm expert about these things, which of course I'm not. Final Exit Network was founded 20 years ago. It's the outgrowth of the Hemlock Society, which Derek founded. And so what we do is provide information and support for people who are considering their end of life options. So I've been volunteering with them for just about 7 years now. And it's so rewarding and heartwarming and heartbreaking and inspiring, because I talk to people who either they or their loved one is experiencing serious medical situation. So they tell me what's going on, I tell them how it works, and then we see, is this a good fit? What are your options? It's way too soon. Your window of opportunity is already closing. It's way too late. So it's really challenging and really rewarding. So let me tell you, cheat sheet. Final Exit Network is a membership organization. As I say, we've been around for 20 years. Membership is not required to take advantage of our support services. What should I say? So I'll just read you our mission statement. We hold that mentally competent adults who suffer from terminal illness or intractable physical pain or chronic or progressive physical disabilities, or who face loss of autonomy and selfhood through dementia, have a basic human right to choose to end their lives when they judge their quality of life to be unacceptable. So we are able to support, as it says, cognitive decline, neurodegenerative diseases like ALS and Parkinson's. We also have a category called constellation of conditions. So this is, I can't drive anymore. I'm losing eyesight. I'm afraid of falling. I'm experiencing incontinence. Many minor, seemingly minor, but when we start adding them up, my quality of life is really impaired, and it's only going to get worse. I don't know how much longer I'm going to put up with it. So it used to be called, or in some circles is called, rational old age suicide. When all my friends are dead, I don't want to be here. So I'll walk you through the application process. Oh, and I should say that the modality we support is inert gas. So it used to be helium was the recommendation, and then partly helium started being laced with oxygen. So that is no longer viable. And one thing I tell all my clients, whatever they decide to do or whatever options they explore, they need to be 100% certain that they're going to be 100% successful. No mishaps. I can't tell you the number of people I've spoken with who have gotten impatient and frustrated and tried one modality or another and ended up risking being incarcerated, incapacitated, institutionalized, all the things they were trying to avoid. It's heartbreaking. So that's why we believe that our support services are so necessary. And of course, as you well know, our support services are not endorsed by everyone. I just saw a documentary, and at the end of the documentary, a woman took advantage of the medical aid and not in Vermont, but she was a Connecticut resident, so she had to make plans to get herself to Vermont to take advantage of their mentally dying, because in fact, she was the woman who had sued the state of Vermont to relax their residency requirements. So only at this point, only Oregon and Vermont no longer require residency requirements. California has relaxed its 15-day waiting period, so it's now 48 hours, because sometimes 15 days doesn't seem like very much, but when you're in agony and you're dying, 15 days can be unendurable. So the application process. So we recommend initiating an application when the person thinks they're within 6 months to a year of wanting to exit. And the process itself takes about 4 to 6 weeks, we estimate. If the person's application is accepted and they haven't exited at the end of 3 years, we ask them to reapply to make sure that we have current information. We found that a lot can change in that amount of time. And before we put that cap on relatively recently, we had people who had applied, been accepted, and then we didn't hear from them for 5 years, or 10 years, or 15 years. And then they say, okay, well, now I'm ready. Well, we didn't have their paperwork. The volunteer who had been working with them was no longer with the organization. So we decided that we needed to up our game. And this is a pretty strict protocol, but we found, and we're always tweaking it, but we found that it's pretty effective. So the application process starts with a letter saying, this is who I am, this is what my belief system is, this is my condition, these are the diagnoses, these are the treatments I've either tried or rejected, and this is why I'm seeking support. And it doesn't have to be, sometimes they're a couple paragraphs long. We got one that was 16 pages long. Yeah. And the same thing with the medical records. So whatever medical records are needed to substantiate what's in the letter. So recent physical, the original diagnosis, whatever few pages, not the mountain of every office visit ever made, every no, because then I have to sit through it and get grumpy. So those are snail mailed to the office in Tallahassee. Then they're scanned and sent to me as the regional coordinator. And I should just say that I'm not the regional coordinator for California. So if you know anyone who might be interested in our support services, they can contact the organization through either the 866 number and get the answering service, or the website, and then they can describe a little bit about what the situation is. And my colleague Jill will call them and do one-on-one counseling and go over some of these issues. So then once I have the medical records and the letter, then I arrange for another volunteer to conduct a pretty in-depth telephone interview. Where would this take place? Who has access to that space? Are there pets involved? Do you have a date in mind? Who among family, friends, and physicians is aware of the situation? Who's supportive? Who's not? They drill pretty deeply so that if and when the application is accepted, and the exit guide is assigned, that volunteer has as much information as possible. Usually by the time it gets that far in the process, so then it's all sent to the medical review committee. It's an ad hoc team of 3 medical professionals who make a determination. Usually they say, yes, this application is accepted for exit guide assignment. Sometimes they say, oh, we're a little confused, or we'd like a little more documentation. and a letter from a specialist, one more test. And sometimes they say, I'm really sorry, we can't accept this application. There's something in it that might put either the volunteers or the organization itself at risk. And we have been sued more than once. And as my supervisor cheerfully reminds me, oh yes, it's just a matter of time before we're sued again. So nothing we do is illegal. We're not providing equipment. We're not touching equipment. All we're doing is providing information and support. But I can imagine that there are some organizations and individuals who would not like me even talking about these options when I counsel my clients. So let's think positively that the application has been approved and the exit guide is assigned. So I work with my supervisor, which volunteers are available, and they, the senior exit guide, follows the person, goes over many more details, more questions, digs deep into family dysfunction. And then if they don't see any red flags, they send the person a list of equipment. Pretty simple and straightforward. There are 7 items: canister of nitrogen, a regulator, an adapter, tubing, a hood, and a neck band. And once the person has purchased all of that, they call the exit guides, and then they travel in pairs, a senior guide and an associate guide, and they do what we call an education visit. So they show the person very patiently and professionally how to assemble the equipment. They won't touch anything. So my first experience with Final Exit Network, Brenda invited me to be with her, and she was losing her eyesight, she was losing cognition, she was really frustrated and impatient. Can't you just do this for me? I can't do it, I can't do it. And I watched as the exit guide so great. Oh, yeah. Let's start over. And then we got that. And then she got that. And then once and they'll even do a little test run. So the modality is that if and when the time comes, the person has created a hood and they pull the hood over their head. They continue to breathe normally and naturally, but they're breathing nitrogen, which we all breathe all the time anyway. But this is 100% nitrogen, and it's pushing the oxygen out of the body. We lose consciousness in less than a minute, and the heart stops after less than 15 minutes. So it's peaceful, it's painless, it's foolproof. As my supervisor says, it's not glamorous. There's the yuck factor of having a hood over one's head. And and this modality is totally doable on one's own using the 2 resources I mentioned, Peaceful Pill Handbook and Final Exit 2020. So what I encourage people to do is get one or the other or both of those resources, look at the instructions, and think about whether they can do it. And some people say, oh yeah, I'm a DIY guy, I'm an engineer, I can do this, no problem. Other people say, I'm nervous, I don't want to screw this up. I want somebody to be with me. So after the education visit, then the person has everything they need to move forward with confidence, or what often happens is they call the exit guides back and say, okay, now I'm really ready. The exit guide can make a return visit and can be with the person at the time of the exit. So, and when I started with the organization, the protocol was the exit guides would remove the equipment. So they looked like this person died in that cause. Unfortunately, because of the situation in the country, we could be accused of tampering with the death scene. So now the protocol is to leave the equipment in place, which means that the person will have written a letter saying, I did this in my own volition, nobody helped me. and it's considered a suicide. So suicide is what goes on the death certificate. Whereas with medical aid in dying, what goes on the death certificate is the underlying malady. Even though the person is hastening their death, it's the cancer or the whatever that goes on the death certificate. So some people don't like that. And one thing I counsel people about is to be discreet. So yes, their immediate family members need to be on board, be aware of what's, oh, well, I never talked to her, or yeah, I don't think she'd be supportive, let's not mention it. And that's where we've gotten into really serious hot water, because people are grief-stricken, they're angry, you murdered our aunt, and they sue the organization. So that's why we have such a very strict protocol. And often the exit guys will take it upon themselves with permission to call the husband, to call the estranged son, whoever is deemed important to know what's going on. So that's how that unfolds. And why don't I stop for questions? Because that was a lot overwhelming. I do this all day, every day, but I can imagine this is a lot. Yes.
I have to update my estate planning. Is really old. Do you have some of the resources that we can contact? I've got lawyers on your website.
We have a lot of really important information on our website. We have a supplemental advanced care directive for dementia. We have all kinds of things, but I don't think we have a list of lawyers. But I'm right with you. I dug out my will in anticipation of some of the presentations I've been making, and I realized I signed it in 2002. So I need to look at it and probably have it revised. So as I said last month, you know, we think, oh yeah, I've got that all in place. Yeah, all done. Well, no, we need to look at it every 5 or 10 years and say, just as you're saying, that person is no longer available to be my advanced care proxy. This person moved out of state. So, but I don't think we have that specific information, but we do, there are some organizations that I think, and if you really get stuck, you can call the number, and the regional coordinator for California can help point you in some direction. So that's a really important question. Yes.
You said that your volunteers will call family members. Is that because you can't tell them themselves they would have you do that, or is that, what did you?
That's a really good question. It's a little of both. Sometimes they can't, sometimes they won't. No, I haven't talked to her in 15 years, I'm not gonna call her now. Well, you can't move forward until, I had a very unfortunate situation, because when I first started, I thought, oh, I've gotten my client through all through all this paperwork, the medical review committee has said, yes, it's accepted for exit guide assignment, done my job. And then the exit guide started working with the person and made a difficult determination. You can't move forward. Either the physical site where the person is, or in one case, when I'm thinking about the woman's daughter was the executor of her estate and completely vociferously unsupportive and threatened to sue. Like, well, no, can't move forward. And she was really, really upset. Fortunately, she was upset with me, although I apologize profusely, but she was really mad at the exit guide. Well, this is to protect everybody. And when I'm talking about legal things, I should also say that our legal counsel reminds us that it's not illegal to hasten one's death. So where it comes into becomes murky is we don't want to put anyone else at risk, either final exit volunteers or a family member or a friend. We have to often get asked the question, well, could my girlfriend remove the equipment. And like, that is up to your girlfriend and the exit guys if they want to look the other direction. But, or can I buy the equipment for my wife? No, well, you can, but no fingerprints, virtual or otherwise. So use her credit card or pay cash, but don't, because we had situations where people came out of the woodwork and said, what just happened? And people have gotten into serious trouble. No, no, we don't. That's a really good question. And I think at least one, if not both of the Swiss clinics do videotape the whole proceeding. Just to show exactly what has gone down, but I think we do not. And we rely only on telephone and snail mail. We don't text, we don't email, just to protect people's privacy and security, because those things which we use all the time, anybody can get into our system and know exactly what we're doing. And we don't want that to happen.
Family members allowed to be present?
Yes, good question. Yes, other family members are definitely allowed to be present. I'll tell you the story of how I got involved with the organization, which speaks to this point. I had been hosting Death Cafés, and I met a woman, and we sort of became not even friends, just acquaintances. And one day she called me and said, Jim, I applied to Final Exit Network, my application has been approved, and the exit guides are coming on Tuesday afternoon. Would you be with me? And I think I had sort of maybe vaguely heard of Final Exit Network, but I had no, and I said, yes, I'm honored, of course I'll be there. And then I took a deep breath. What did I just agree to, and do I have what it takes? So I called the exit guides and said, what is this going to unfold? What if I can't do it? And they were incredibly professional, and they said, this is what it's going to look like. If you can't do it, you can step into another room. So probably not a big party, like we can't all go to my hastened death. I know you'd like to come. But certainly one person or two. It's sort of like, have any of you seen any of the documentaries about medical aid in dying? It's somewhat similar. I don't know if you've seen Jack as a Plan or some of those, where there is a bit of a party in the front room, and then Jack goes into the bedroom with his wife and the medication. And so it's kind of a mix and match. So you could have the gangs all here the night before, and then maybe a friend or two at the exit itself. These are really good questions.
And then after you're dead, and they haven't removed the thing off your head, somebody calls who?
It depends. They call, it depends on whether the person is in hospice, whether funeral arrangements have been made, but that's a,
They don't have to call the police.
hopefully not. That's one of the things that we do as part of our advocacy, because a lot of police are unfamiliar with this. They kind of get freaked out, and we're trying to normalize this option. So sometimes the police are involved, and the exit guides will work with the family members, because I looked at an important component of the whole process, which you're reminding me of, is discovery. So the process cannot be interrupted. It only takes, let's say, half an hour, but no interruptions. And by the same token, the body doesn't want to be left any longer than necessary. So each individual situation is unique. They put into a place, like, call me at noon tomorrow, and if I don't answer, something's wrong, call the authorities. Or they put a note on the door and say, if I don't answer the doorbell, don't come in. So whatever is appropriate to that situation. And I'll just share another cautionary tale. So I was working with a woman, and she had, or actually I wasn't, there were exit guides working with this woman. They had flown across country, and her discovery, the couple that she had designated to be the discovery, took it upon themselves to alert the authorities before the exit. So this was not gonna happen. So the guy who had flown across country, rented a car, went to the hotel room, like, no. Back he went. And so I was brought in as an emergency situation. Once they got everything under control, then we were able to move forward with the exit. And
Did that person do that to stop it? We don't.
we don't know. I would like to think they were well intentioned. But it's very frustrating when somebody takes it upon themselves to subvert someone's plan. And I've had lots of people saying, oh, well, you know, my husband would never do this, but I might be able to do it while he's out of 10. I don't think that's not gonna work. And people say, oh, you know, she loves me so much, she just can't bear to lose me. Well, how much does she love you if you are in complete and utter agony? So, I was going to talk about this story. So I was brought in, and I was working with a very experienced senior guide, and I was very inexperienced. And she's the client is in position, everything, the hood is on her head, everything is all set up. And my colleague turns to me and says, I don't think there's enough nitrogen in the canister. What do you think, Jim? I said, you have way more experience than I do. No, I'm leaving it up. No, I don't think we can move forward. So this poor woman had given away her cat, and you know, she was all prepared to be part of this claim. And so I was quite on her behalf. She was so, I don't even know what the word is. She said, well, I guess I can have lunch and do a little laundry after all. So a week later, she had gotten a replacement full canister, and we came back, and we were able to support her exit. But anyway, you can see all the snafus of my, but yeah, you had your hand up for lunch.
Can a family member assist in the assembly of the equipment and not touching what others can? And whatever degree of participation, should a waiver of liability or understanding be executed specifically for this type of participation?
Well, these are really important questions, and I think we all have them. And I guess I don't know. I mean, I've never had anyone suggest a waiver of liability. And most of we've been doing this for 20 years. I don't know how many exits we've supported, many. But that's why the exit guides are so careful, so that we don't have any mishaps. So if a family member, I should also add that the guides are very professional in terms of workarounds, because the canister is heavy. So one of the things is, can you lift a gallon of milk across the room? Well, it could be rolled, or maybe a family member could hold something while the person takes the tube into the hood. So I don't want to say absolutely not. I don't want to say, oh, sure. I think each situation is different, and I'm not sure, because I'm certainly not a lawyer, whether the waiver of liability would stand up. But that might, if one got to that point, one could talk to the exit guide, and they could find out whether that would change the situation. But you can see how, one, how straightforward this is, and two, how complicated it can be.
So you're indicating that the participation aspects of a family member are limited and defined in the guides.
Right, because we don't want to put anyone at risk. And if there were a legal investigation, oh, what's her fingerprint doing on this thing? How come her charge card was used to buy this canister? This could be misconstrued as a homicide. And that's absolutely not the case, and we don't want any suggestion of it. Did you have a question?
I did. So when we talked about the death certificate and whether it's the cause of death, are there issues with things like insurance payouts and things like that if it's suicide?
Apparently not. I think, somebody explained to me that California, if we buy an insurance policy on Friday and we suicide on Monday, yes, that would render it null and void. But if it's, I can't remember if it's 2 years in place or 6 months, but if it's been in place for whatever the contract itself says, then it's payable. But that's a really good question. The other question that sometimes comes up is this going to affect the value of my home? So, because apparently if one dies at the home, whether it's by suicide or any other means, it has, and again, I'm not a real estate agent, I don't know how this works, but apparently it does have to be disclosed, or it doesn't, or I don't know what. But it can be an issue, or at least people can think it's an issue. So all of these are really important questions that need to be addressed, and again, the exit guides, because it's not just, as you can see, it's not just getting the hood in the right position and pulling it down. There's lots and lots of moving parts to this procedure. Yeah.
I think if you die in the house or somebody dies in the house, it only needs to be disclosed to the next buyer. But so the person who then buys the house, they don't have to disclose it to the future buyer.
Okay, so just the
I
one.
think it's just the one.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought, but as I say, and all these rules are subject to change without notice. So, but you're asking all the important questions. Yes.
2 questions.
Good.
It sounds like what you're saying is if a family member or somebody associated with the trust or a will is not in favor of it, that supersedes the individuals, right? Is that correct?
Unfortunately, that's the case because, we'll get to your second question, but which seems to me incredibly unfair. Why shouldn't we have autonomy to make this decision? Why do I have to have whoever it is buy in? And how can they, if they don't support it, absolutely undermine my option? That makes me crazy.
So this is sort of a gory detail question. Is there an option to the hood part of the equipment?
No, not to my,
To the hood?
to the hood. Is there an option to the hood? No. Yes, well, I'm glad you see this is a great group. I'm claustrophobic too. And I was like, oh no, this is not gonna work for me. And when I went to the training, the hood is transparent. The guide is there making eye contact. And as I say, one loses consciousness in less than a minute, probably the longest minute, but I didn't have any trouble. And the hood is inflated, so it's not, there's no suffocation. It's just, we're breathing normally and naturally. I was gonna say something.
You can get the hood on Amazon.
You can get it. You're laughing. You can get it at Safeway. Bing, bing, bing. It's a turkey-based event. So,
Brown and all.
Yeah, so it's readily available. So yes, you can get it on Amazon. You don't even have to. So, did I answer both your questions? Okay, yes, ma'am.
Question. As a loved one, and you're sitting there watching somebody take their breaths, you might think you're on board, but feel very anxious at a time. So do the guides really walk the participants through this and help them in case they get anxious? And
Such a good question. Yes. And because this is, so when I was invited, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do it. And as I say, this woman wasn't even a friend. She was just somebody who she knew she could count on because she had a relative who knew that she couldn't play that role. So she called on me. We've also had situations where the person has said, yeah, bring it on, let's do it. Go. And then they couldn't quite do it. And the guys were telling us that, okay, well, let's take a break, think this through, and sometimes the guys just have to come back, either a day later or weeks later. So yeah, this is a big deal. And if the person can't, they can excuse themselves, and there doesn't need to be another person there. So they can kiss them goodbye and say, see you on the other side. It's all flexible and fluid. And I will say, I've been with 3 people who exited using this modality, only one of which was I representing the organization. And they took their last exhale with a big smile. So I know from experience that it is peaceful. I mean, it's when I got what they wanted. In one case, there was, and there can be some, as the muscles relax, there can be some movement. And so that's why the guides are very careful to make sure that the person is placed appropriately so that if there's some flailing, they don't knock with the canister, the hood doesn't come off. So it can look like there can even be vocalization, so they prepare the family member. Okay, these are some of the options. In my case, none of that happened, but it can be disconcerting, like when you've never experienced it. And I think she's in pain. I think she's not happy. This is the body that we know. It's too much. And a lot of people say, no, I do not want my daughter to see me wearing this idiot's hood. So, okay, have a sip of champagne, say goodbye, and maybe the daughter can play another role. So as I keep saying, each situation is unique. There's no, has to be this and that. And that's why I'm so impressed with our exit guides. And I talk to them regularly, of course. And one of my colleagues said, oh, Janet, I would never do what you do. Go into a stranger's home, work with them, meet their family members. And she said, oh, Jim, I couldn't do what you do. So we all find our niches in this organization. Yeah.
So once somebody is exited, I mean,
We'll call it a hood. We won't call it.
because she like family and then if they were to come in, that whole thing would be, oh, the last vision you have of your parent or whatever. So who is it that takes the hood off?
Well, it depends who's called. So if it's hospice or if it's the funeral home, I'm not sure, it depends on certain situations. And after the guides have left, because they stay with the person, check their pulse, make sure that they are completely gone, and then they recommend allowing at least an hour or two before anybody's contact, to make sure that the body is cold. Because if somebody's contacted and the body might still be warm, they might try to do CPR or some other invasive. So absolutely do not want that to happen. So in that interim, a family member could, I didn't say this out loud, could remove the hood. Knowing that they were putting themselves at some risk.
So who declares the person dead? Is it the office or?
No, well, the guys have, but not officially, they're not signing a death certificate. So it's whoever's brought in to discover the body.
Hospice.
Yeah, hospice, the coroner, the police, whoever it is. Yes, ma'am.
Me?
Yes.
I just wanted, this is kind of going back when someone asked the question about what if the police come or so there's some intervention. And I just wanted to mention that for hospice patients, there will be a DNR in the house because that's required to be admitted to hospice. So the police hopefully would honor that, and it's recommended.
Hopefully, be the operative word.
And it's recommended put on the refrigerator. That's kind of the understood place
Right.
that the law enforcement is supposed to look for. And the family should all know that too. I just wanted to mention that because it should be a little clearer for a hospice patient.
Yes.
Should be.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. Yes, we often encourage our clients, if they're eligible for hospice, to be in hospice. But as I'm stating it, hopefully is the operative word, because we've all heard situations where there's a DNR and the EMT or the whomever has completely disregarded it. So,
That's by
you're asking all the right questions and raising all the important issues. Are there, yeah,
There's also a form called a pulse,
yeah,
which is almost like a more intense than a DNR. And it tends to be a bright pink around, and that means you don't do anything.
right.
Nothing.
And it's not surprising.
Yeah.
And it's bright pink, and again, we're putting it on our refrigerator,
Yeah.
but my quip is always, well, what if I don't happen to collapse in the kitchen? And we still have situations where the EMT does not abide by the pulse. So it's really unfortunate. These are all pretty blunt instruments. And the medical profession is trained to keep us alive under any and all circumstances, even if it's not necessarily what we want. So, yeah.
So if you have, a hospice, if hospice is involved, and you have your hospice nurse that comes out, they really need to know what your plans are.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. The hospice needs to know what the plan is, whether it's the NCD, medical dying, the final exit network modality. And again, some hospice workers are totally fluent in this and are comfortable, and others not so much. So, and it's my understanding, and I'm not involved too directly with hospice, is that hospices are supposed to say on their website whether they support a hastened death. Many of them don't have it on the website, and many of them have refused to answer. And it's, as I say, you can't just call around and say, this is my plan when you do it. Yes.
I think it's very, very important for people to start thinking about these things before they get sick, before they get older, before they start suffering a cognitive decline. It is critical to communicate to your family and friends how you would like to die. You know, you need to make it clear, you know, I'm trying to avoid the 3 Ds. What is it? Dependence, diapers, and dementia. You know, if I'm hitting all 3 of those, you know, I'm checking out. Yeah, because there are a lot of people that have really hung up on people dying. Because we're so insulated from it these days. So when you start telling people, I don't want to live like this, I don't want to suffer like this, it makes your friends and family much more supportive of your decision when you start a decline or start suffering an illness. You don't want to spring it on them, because then they're going to say, oh, this is something from somebody else. You know, everybody has agendas. And, you know, families are complicated. There's, you know, everybody has that dysfunctional family member. And, you know, it's just, you want to avoid that type of drama as you get older, as you start having health issues.
I couldn't agree more. So perfectly articulated. And as I said last month, having those conversations again and again and again. And sometimes family members, I don't want to talk about it. It's too soon. It makes me uncomfortable. You're giving me nightmares. This is not about you. This is about me and what I want. And I'm going to talk to my medical proxy many, many times to make sure that they will do what I want, not what they would do if they were in my shoes. I'm going to have it all spelled out on my advanced care directive. So thank you so much for reinforcing that. Couldn't agree more. Did you have a question?
Yeah, just a comment. I am a volunteer for Hospice of the East Bay, as are a couple other people in here. And I know Hospice of the East Bay does support assisted.
That's great.
And we've had training. It's not using a hood,
No,
it's using usually medication.
right, probably the
Patient
ventilation diet.
patient has to be completely conscious and able to actually administer the medication themselves.
Yes,
Yeah, so, but anyway, I'm
that's
sure.
great to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I think
Because
there's probably other hospice agencies that do support it.
right, I'm sure there are many who do, and probably just as many who do not. So,
One of my colleagues was asked, he's a volunteer that supports hospice patients, and he was asked to be present at the assisted exit by one of his patients, which I thought was pretty remarkable.
well, and it's interesting, the role of the physician, because, as I said last month, my brother is a retired palliative care physician, and he and I have conversations about this. In fact, to commemorate the 20th anniversary of our organization, I edited this anthology called There at the End, Voices from Final Exit Network. And there's a copy back on the table you can look at and order it through our website. And what it is it's not polemics, it's not protocols, it's not politics, it's nothing but personal stories from family members, from volunteers, from sometimes notes of gratitude from the clients themselves, to normalize this topic, which can be stigmatized. And so beautiful stories of one is called can I have a sip of single malt whiskey right before I do this? Absolutely. But just to see again and again, can my sisters be drumming in the next room? Yes. It's so beautiful. And as I say, I compiled this, and then after it was published, I was reading through it, and I kept crying because each individual story, and they're all very short, it packs a punch, but when one reads them all together, it's really powerful how this can unfold. But I interrupted myself, which I have to do. So my brother said, oh, well, reading your book, I understand that what you do from your perspective and what he does from his palliative care physician perspective is very, very similar. To keep people comfortable and respect their wishes. So, when you talked about the medication, it reminded me that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the medical aided dying protocol is now 5 different medications taken over in a certain sequence over a certain amount of time one or more is an anti-anemic, and then a tranquilizer, and, so, which all of which says, well, can I just have that? Well, that goes back to the peaceful pill. There's no peaceful pill. It has to be all planned out. No, I saw another hand over here. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sick now, but I visualize myself someday doing this, it would have never been. I can't do that. And so I'm wondering why you recommend that so strongly over medication.
Oh, no, absolutely. I don't recommend anything over anything.
Yeah, because
No, if one qualifies for medical aid in dying, absolutely. And I worked with clients who didn't understand that they could use medical aid in dying. So if one has access to that, that would be the recommendation. It's just that the criteria is pretty narrow. So if one doesn't qualify for medical aid in dying, then that's not an option. And final exit network support services might be another option.
really still swallow.
You have to be able to swallow, although I think they're changing the protocol. And it still needs to be self-administered, but they can rig up a thing and it can be administered rectally. So I don't know anything about the specifics of that. There's a wonderful organization too, actually. One is called A Better Exit, and they are working, and the other one is End of Life Choices California. So they are specific to the state, and they know how to access these various options. What else was I just gonna say? More questions. This is great, because this is a lot of complicated material. So it took me a long time to even understand the parallel universe between medical aid and dying and final exit networks modality.
I just wanted to say too, like if somebody has a pulse, the physician ordered life-sustaining treatment, and they can't swallow and they're cognitively impaired, they can, or even if they're not cognitively impaired and they can't swallow, they can have an option in their jaw tube feeding and let them go.
Right. No tube feeding, because I can't remember which of Katie Butler's wonderful books. But her father, somehow they allowed a feeding tube. And then they realized, well, that was a big mistake. And they had getting the feeding tube removed. So any intervention, and one of the things that my brother counseled me was not to focus on the intervention itself or the technology, but to focus on what is an acceptable quality of life. So, okay, we could put a feeding tube in for a couple of days or maybe a couple of weeks, and then we can get you back to where you can live independently. But if not, without that guarantee, no feeding tube. I'm going to be on a feeding tube for the rest of my life.
Patients pull it out, and it heals within the minutes. It's not a big deal.
Really? Oh, okay.
So it's, yeah, and sometimes they want, they're not sure, and they're wavering on the fence of hospice. I was a dietitian, so food feeding was my thing, but, they were waiting on the fence until they decided, and I always told them I had no agenda, I'll go with whatever they wanted. But they said, okay, let's do the feeding tube, and then have them play. It wasn't an NG. They pulled those out too. But, what we did was, they decided they're going home, or they're gonna go with hospice the beach day, something like that. And sometimes they just use them for payments. And so they're not gonna feed them, they're not gonna sustain them. They decide when they go, oh, we're going to do hospice. They still have it there. But it's not for prolonging life or anything. Like that. So they used to not even accept them if they had food too, but they've opened up a little bit more now, so that is better.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. And see, as I say, everything shifts over time. I think it was a year or so ago, we, volunteers of Find Life at Network had a, presentation from End of Life Choices California. And she just dispelled a bunch of myths, because it used to be that the medical aid in dying, came in capsule form, and you had to open, 100 capsules and put them in the applesauce or whatever it was. No, it doesn't come that way anymore. So everything is changing. And I just, there's one organization, that I put it in my notes, let me see, that just changed its name and its URL, but it's a wonderful organization. It's the Academy of Aid in Dying Medicine. So this is a consortium of physicians who are supportive of medical aid in dying. As we know, not all physicians are. And they changed, it used to be called, it used to have a complicated name. In fact, I might have even misnamed it last month because it's been brand new. And the URL is aatm.org, Academy of Aid in Dying Medicine. So, because sometimes people have trouble getting either their primary care physician or the second physician to sign off. So these are physicians who are supportive and can be brought in and help with that medical aid in dying diagnosis. So you guys are great. More questions, comments, clarifications? Singing, dancing? So there are copies of the magazine back there. There is a sign-up sheet if you want to remember what they send, but they don't send a lot of emails. Or you could just go to finalizednetwork.org and poke around. There's lots of interesting information. There's one of the pieces that I have developed is called Ben's 15 Favorite Conversation Starters. So these are films, books, articles that we recommend might facilitate conversation with loved ones who are really uncomfortable. And so what we found is that we can all watch Susan Sarandon in Blackbird and say, oh, well, that's what I want. No, I think I identify with that dog who is not on board. And so it gives a bit of a remove rather than saying, well, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. There's a little bit more space to navigate. And as you said, these conversations can be very challenging for us and for the other person. So sometimes we have to prime the pump and say, okay, let's find the time to have a cup of tea when we're both relaxed. As you said, you're not when you're in crisis, not in an emergency situation. And this is really important for me, for you to understand where I'm coming from. So, let's see, do I have any other things to talk about? Any last questions from, yes, good.
Talked about this last time too, but if you have an advance directive, I know I did this with my mother, because I worked in nursing homes in meeting, and so she said, when it's my time, I just want to be comfortable and listen to music. I said, get it in writing. But every time we had to take her to the doctor I reviewed it. Is this what you want? And I reviewed it with my sister, the secretary, too. So, not a medical person. So we were clear every time we took it in, or if you're healthy, annually.
Yeah.
Just review it all the time, because I started learning more. I worked in oncology and I started learning more about palliative care. And so I reviewed it with my mom. I said, I think you can do this if you want, if you're not sure. You can do a tube feeding for 2 weeks and then discontinue it if you don't get better. There's a whole bunch of different options in there. And so as I learned more, we just updated her.
Absolutely, I highly recommend that. Yes.
And I would just also encourage you to have any documentation actually with you on your phone. With my parents, I had taken it to the hospital, they had scanned everything. And then my father had a massive stroke and they couldn't find it anywhere. I happened to have it on my Google Drive on my phone. They took me downstairs into the basement. They downloaded it there. I then could be talking to the physicians about his care and about what he had said he wanted.
Absolutely, yeah, great story, both of these, because, they told the story last month. So I got my advanced care directive in place, I got my pulse finally, and then I found out, oh, it wasn't attached to my medical record. So I had to follow up and jump through more hoops. So all of this should be straightforward, is not. And the other thing, I had a friend who was a financial planner for many years, and every time she met with all of her clients, she went over not only the financial, but the medical, so that then there was a trail, year by year by year. This is not something I decided last week. This is what I've said for the last 20 years. And by the same token, or the opposite token, I just remember my mother, her whole life saying, oh, no extreme measures, no, my time is gone, just unplug me. Well, there's not always an unplug me. And when she was having serious medical concerns, there was a very invasive, risky procedure. Oh yeah, bring it on, let's do it. Really? After all these years of telling them, and as I said, my brother's a physician, but he wasn't a physician, but like, okay, so what seems, just to reiterate all the points we're making, just keep at it.
And one last comment about caregivers, because my mom was at a board care and she transferred from Kaiser back on hospice. And, it was during 2020 and so, but they liked me, so they let us all in with her. But, they said she's not eating, and my mom hated stuff like, you know, Premier Protein and all this. She would buy me some, and I said, why? I hate it. And she said, well, I'm not eating. And so it was a good chance for me to kind of say, this is not gonna change anything. If you wanna sit with something, you can have it. And if you don't, then it's something you don't like. And, you know, but I had to educate the really sweet caregivers who usually, you know, they take care of them, but they're not really medically trained. And so, and even medically trained people don't realize that that's not painful. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is so great. I'm so glad you're here. Glad that you're all here. But one of our roles is education for ourselves and for our loved ones and for our caregivers, because this is not part of the normal conversation. And it's not easy and things keep changing. And the caregivers may be really well-meaning, but they might be force feeding someone who does not want to eat. Out of kindness, out of generosity, out of love, but it's ill-placed. So you can see there's lots of gradations, things shifting. There's no easy answer to a lot of these questions, but I think the more we talk about it, think about it, write it down. Even the process of filling out the advanced care directive for me was really illuminating. Like, oh, I didn't know I thought like that. Oh, So it can be a really, and it can be a spiritual exercise as well. Just what are my priorities? What are my beliefs? What do I want? What am I willing to do for the person who asked me to be their medical proxy? No, I'm sorry, I can't. Or yes, I'm honored to have been asked. So, any last questions? We're a little with them, what did you say?
Last words.
Yeah.
So do you recommend, I mean, you know, I'm a young person and I know we're not sick, but a pulse, like mom, they want to. So you, I mean, at all times, like something like that, like in your records?
one is no for everything. You can take the pulse,
When you
but
talk about pulse, when you end up like in the hospital, or, and that's my experience.
You answer that, I'll answer.
well, I was just gonna say, you're supposed to have it with you whenever you go there, but, to the hospital, but.
So when I was doing my advanced care directive, my brother said, you need a pulse. I think I told this story last time. And he said, I thought pulse were for old people and sick people, which was sort of what you're. And he said, no, you need pulse. So I went in to Kaiser. They had no idea what I was talking about. How do you spell it? What does it stand for? You don't need it. It's only for sick people and old people. You can change your mind. It's only 3 questions, 3 categories.
Yeah, there's it's in 3 little blocks.
Right,
The
A, B,
first
and
one
C.
says full code, and the second one,
One is about nutrition, one is about ventilator, and one is about.
yeah, but you have like 3 options.
Right,
per block.
it's really
And then
straightforward.
even on the nutrition, you could say, I want a tube feeding, I'm open to tube feeding, if you guys know language. Or I'm open to tube feeding for a limited period, or no tube feeding.
Right.
And, but, I mean, if you're healthy, you can say full code, you know, but if you're against correct and go back up and say, suddenly I'm not healthy, then that'll cover you there.
Right, and I realized that my pulse is fading, it's not hot pink anymore, and so, I need to get another one, because I need to make sure that it says what I want, yes.
Yeah, to that point, I had a memory care facility tell me like, oh, we don't use that here. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, oh, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You do use it here. And what I would recommend with those, because they're, you know, you have to go and get it witnessed, or, you know, you have to get multiple copies. So what we did with the family member, we had one in the bed, we had one in the refrigerator, and we had one in the car. So that if you have him out somewhere, something happens, you have it right there. So it was always a great down.
Excellent idea, yeah.
Because you
And,
can't copy them because of the bright, they make it so you cannot scan them and copy, they have to be original.
well, and so that was the rest of my story, so, you know, she was trying to talk me out of it, and I thought, you know, like some of us, I kind of knew what I was talking about, don't try to talk me out of it. I'm fairly intelligent, English is my first language, and I thought, well, what if that wasn't the case for somebody? I mean, this is really important. And these medical professionals, who I don't malign them at all, my family is full of them, but they need education and training, and it falls upon us to do it. But about the photocopies, now,
That's a good idea.
so it's a form that has to be provided and signed by the physician. So you can look it up on the internet, see what it looks like, think about questions, but then, so after my whole thing, I met with my primary care physician, and okay, bye, see you later. I said, well, I came here for my pulse and I'm not leaving without it. Oh, well, let me see if I can find her. More kind of delays and cluelessness. And, oh, well, here's your pulse and here's some photocopies. You cannot photocopy on pink. So they wasted all this paper. I mean, it was just kind of a comedy of errors. And yes,
Are you saying that the primary care physician at Kaiser would have that form?
oh, absolutely, like that.
It doesn't work.
Social work, yeah, and in fact, it was the social worker who was brought in and who tried to talk me out of it. Yeah, she was lovely, but she didn't know who she was dealing with.
The doctor has to sign, the doctor has to
Right,
sign.
I know that. But would administrative services have it, or they probably wouldn't know what that is?
No, I think it has to be signed by the physician, and the physician, my physician was young and really, really uncomfortable. He would not look me in the eye as he was signing this form. So, and I've told this story, and I don't want to malign Kaiser, I just didn't emphasize the point that everybody needs more education, and it falls to us to do it. So, yeah.
I was hearing pulse forming, I think it's important that everybody knows it's POLS.
It's in order of life sustaining treatment.
Yeah.
That's that.
Just one.
Yeah.
OLST, yeah, thanks for that.
too was that most of the time, like, we had hospital and psychiatrists do too, and so they work 7 to 7, 7 days a week, and then they trade off, at the apartment. But they would usually on board, it was when a patient had like 5 doctors that you would run into trouble. Like if they had a cardio, instead of surgeon, they had a renal doctor that, then that, you had to be really, that was really hard to get them all on board.
Yeah, it was frequently not the case manager that goes out over this medical profession. Well, I want to thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for your. You can all come back next month for the Death Cafe. We will not be me standing up here talking. It'll be all of us sitting in a circle, sharing stories, fears, beliefs, whatever comes up. So it'll be all about you finally. So please, come back next month. Thanks again.
Would you record that?
Yes.